There's a whole ton of guard artillery pieces in the Forge World range. Today we'll be looking at how they stack up after the new Imperial Armour Compendium. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics for an Imperial Guard strategy video, where today we're going to be looking at every single artillery piece in the Forge World range. They've got new rules for the weapons, new points values, so I was really quite interested to see if there were any decent options that would poke their heads above the parapet and compete well against the Codex options. I'd say the gold standard for guard artillery at the moment is the Manticore. The points changes to Basilisks and the lower amount of turns in the game mean that Manticores are just a lot more viable now, and I'd say they're one of the most competitive guard units. So we have a baseline for what to compare to. Manticores are an 145 point heavy support choice, getting 2d6 shots at strength 10, AP-2 and d3 damage. And for the purposes of this comparison, we're going to be comparing the average damage output per 100 points against 3 different targets. Hordes are represented by Orc Boys. Space Marines, we have a standard tactical marine profile at toughness 4 and 2 wounds, and then we've got a common toughness 7 vehicle target with multi-wounds and a 3+ save. The Manticore is pretty good as it's really quite general purpose. It'll kill a few hordes, it'll put some hurt on heavy infantry, and point for point it will really sting heavy vehicles, particularly when it's souped up with a tank ace stratagem, full payload. Full payload means that the Manticore's attacks are all just flat damage 3, you can have one for a 1 command point stratagem, and then if you're willing to sacrifice your Warlord traits for another one, then you can do that as well. On top of all that, it's decently durable, with toughness 7, 11 wounds and a 3+ save. It's actually quite mobile as well, and can zip around the battlefield quite quickly, and can also take a few pot shots with its heavy bolter. It's quite a good all-round artillery piece. I would say the only major weakness is a lack of turn 5 shooting, as you've only got 4 turns worth of ammo, which is a downside, but games often do tend to be decided by turn 5 anyway, and it's far less of a weakness than an 8th. In any case, let's get into the various Forge World options and see how they stack up against the excellent Manticore. First up, we have a light piece in the Heavy Mortar. It's a 70 points heavy support choice. It's immobile, and the rules for it and its crew are now very simplified. It just counts as one model with toughness 6, 7 wounds and a 4+ save. Its heavy mortar is 48 inch range, strength 6, AP-1 and flat damage 2, so fairly general purpose, jack of all trades, master of none. I'm afraid point for point against the Manticore it just doesn't stack up very well. It's worse both against hordes, toughness 4 marines and a toughness 7 vehicle, and particularly so against heavy targets. I guess it's kind of handy that you could fire at multiple targets if you had multiple of these, but combined with immobility, I just don't think it's strong enough to be included in competitive lists. It's not exactly terrible for anti-horde though. Next up we have the Armageddon pattern Medusa, which has honestly become a far more interesting choice. This thing is 140 points, so a bit cheaper than the Manticore, and per 100 points is still a bit underwhelming against Orcs, not so bad against toughness 4 Space Marines, but in terms of base stats it does actually outcompete the Manticore when shot at vehicles. If for whatever reason you don't fancy another Manticore with full payload, or you already have 2 of them, then this one isn't too bad in terms of anti-armor artillery fire. Its Medusa Siege Mortar is strength 10, 36 inch range, heavy d6, AP-3, damage d6, and can target units out of line of sight. Pretty much an artillery demolisher cannon that only fires d6 shots. It's reasonably tough as well, toughness 7 with 11 wounds and a 3+ save, and like the Manticore has decent mobility, a heavy bolter, and you can take it in squadrons. If you want to put some hurt on heavies that are hiding out of line of sight, then this guy's pretty decent. If you don't want to pay for the full tank chassis though, then there is the option of the Medusa Siege Carriage. This one sports the exact same gun, and is only 120 points, so 20 points cheaper. For the trade-off though, you do lose all mobility whatsoever, a significant amount of durability, it's only 7 wounds and a 4+ save, and not being able to move could be a bit of a liability, as only 36 inch range means that your opponent could potentially outrange you if they really need to. The points drop will give you some better numbers in terms of raw damage output. It's now really not so far away in terms of efficiency compared with the Manticore with full payload, and I think that this one could be usable. It is a bit more high risk, high reward, but if you can keep it somewhere where it can keep firing and also stay safe, then it's a very reasonable choice. Next we have the Armageddon pattern Basilisk. This is a 130 points heavy support choice, and is essentially a 5 point upgrade over the standard Basilisk. Similar to how Basilisks stack up against Manticores at the moment, it is just a bit underwhelming against hordes or against toughness 7 vehicles, that was similarly good to the Manticore against toughness 4 Space Marines. Essentially with this one, you're paying 5 points to upgrade a standard Basilisk to be toughness 7 rather than toughness 6. I'm a bit at a wash as to whether or not this is actually worth it. is a small durability upgrade, will help against some weapons, but will be completely meaningless against strength 8 or better weapons, true anti-tank firepower. In any case, in terms of artillery pieces, I still prefer Manticores to either pattern of Basilisk. As with the Medusa Carriage, we also have an Earthshaker Carriage option. This one's 120 points, so it's the same as the Medusa Carriage. This one's 120 points compared with a standard Basilisk at 125, so basically you're getting a 5-point discount on the platform to drop its durability significantly. It's only 7 wounds compared with 11, and 4+ save compared with 3, and also you're immobile and lose the heavy bolter. It does have the advantage of not really caring so much about being immobile, because the Earthshaker cannon is quite a long range, so you could set it right at the back. But honestly, I would just pay the extra 5 points to gain you a lot of durability, a heavy bolter, and the ability to move. I would generally always take a standard Basilisk over this. Next up we have the Heavy Quad Launcher. This is a 90-point heavy support critter, and its Heavy Quad Launcher will deal 46 shots at 48-inch range, with strength 5, AP nothing, and damage 1. Clearly an anti-horde tool, so it's a lot better to compare to the Wyvern or Mortars, where it actually stacks up quite decently. Compared with the Wyvern, you're killing 4.3 orcs, compared with the 3.2 from that, and it's pretty much the same average damage output compared with the Mortar teams, when you are firing at Toughness 4 hordes. It's also not awful against Toughness 4 Space Marines compared with other options, just because it's so cheap and fires so many Strength 5 shots, but it's going to be very underwhelming indeed whenever you're firing against anything Toughness 6 or greater. Again, with all of these emplacement type things, it is immobile, and it's really hampered in durability. Only 6 wounds and a 4+ save means it is quite easy to delete, but at least that 48-inch range does mean that you should be able to set it up at least fairly far back, somewhere out of line of sight hopefully. Overall, I think that this one is decently usable, and I would consider it a solid option against the Wyverns or Mortar teams if you want some artillery that's specifically going to target light infantry. Next up we come to the Colossus Bombard. This one's 150 points, which I think you're partly paying just because it's so tough. It's toughness 8, 12 wounds, and has a 3+ save, so it's going to be as hard to remove as a Rust. Its Colossus Siege Mortar is really long range at 240 inches. It fires heavy 3d3 shots, so an average of 6, at strength 6, AP -2, damage d3, and ignoring cover. While being a really hard to remove platform, it is a bit underwhelming to be honest in terms of damage output. Again, a bit of a jack of all trades, master of none, with worse stats against all targets compared with a Manticore. Ignores cover is kind of nice, and it is quite efficient against targeting Space Marines with Gravis armor. They're pretty much ideally suited to its profile, but I'm just not sure that its damage output is enough to justify it. It's just a bit expensive for how much damage it kicks out. Finally, we come to 2 of the artillery choices in the Lord of War section for Astra Militarum. We have the Praetor, which is a 400 points Lord of War. It's basically a missile firing variant of the Crassus, and it can fire either foe hammer or firestorm missiles. Firestorm missiles are heavy 3d6, strength 6, AP -2, damage 2, and ignore cover, and foe hammer ones are heavy 2d6, strength 9, AP -2, and damage d6. It's a Titanic Lord of War choice with 20 wounds and a 3+ save, but unfortunately its massive price tag of 400 points means that again it's just not very efficient versus pretty much any target. It's really quite bad against infantry compared with other choices point for point. It's kind of best against vehicles, but if you were just to invest in the same amount of Manticores or Medusas, you're likely going to get more bang for your buck. It does have a few advantages. It gets 2 heavy bolters, the Titanic keyword means that it can fall back and shoot, and if it does get locked up in melee, it could potentially deal some nasty damage with adamantium tracks, hitting on 2+ with Crush then. However, a hefty 400 points price tag and being a Lord of War, which will cost you something like 3 command points, just means that this thing is really quite bad rules-wise at the moment, and it's only really going to get fielded for Rule of Cool. Last up we come to the Minotaur, which to be honest just suffers from all the same problems as the Praetor. This one's only 300 points, and actually has 22 wounds, so it's considerably more durable than the Praetor, and point for point has a very similar damage output with those twin Earthshaker cannons. It's a bit annoying to see that those twin Earthshaker cannons are less powerful than just 2 Earthshaker cannons fired side by side. They're heavy 2d3+3, strength 9, AP -3, and damage d3. It's pretty much the same underwhelming damage output as the Praetor, and you're going to be very much better off with Manticores or Basilisks, at least from a dealing damage point of view. It does have a special rule called Armored Frontis, which gives you the slightly irrelevant upgrade of ignoring AP -1 weapons. Typically I think this thing is going to fear more things like dedicated anti-tank firepower rather than autocannons and things, and it is a fair bit more durable than the Praetor point for point, so I'd say it probably wins out of the pair of them. Still though, those enormous guns just need to do more damage if they want to be efficient and included in competitive lists. So overall, out of the Forge World artillery range, My favourite option is the Armageddon Medusa or the Medusa Carriage, which I think can compete pretty decently in terms of anti-tank firepower, though I think I would only take one after I've already taken at least one Manticore equipped with full payload. They could be pretty good with the custom regiment that gives you reroll the number of shots and the extra 6-inch range, both of which would help it out a lot, or you could just go something simple like Cadian or Katachan, which are both decent picks as well. My other favourite out of the list is the heavy quad launcher, which as I said I think competes very well with mortars and wyverns. It's got better damage output than the wyvern, and isn't going to die to bolter fire easily like the mortars would, though it does come with its own downsides, being immobile and ideally wanting to be out of line of sight. I'd say though out of the other artillery pieces, full payload Manticores, or even just regular Manticores, do generally seem to be the way to go. So let me know what you think of the Guard Forge World choices. It'd be interesting to hear your thoughts, or if you have managed to use any of them with the new rules yet. In the future I'm hoping to do a similar video for the various battle tank patterns for Imperial Guard, so feel free to subscribe if you'd like to see that, or just check back later for general 40k content coming out pretty much every day. If you have been enjoying my videos and would like to help keep them coming on the channel, I'd just like to mention that the channel has a Patreon page which you can find down in the video description. Channel patrons get a fair few advantages, such as being able to see videos early each week, the chance to vote in various polls to see what comes next on the channel, and also automatic entry into the channel's monthly prize draw with a chance to win some big model kits. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support the channel, then the link is down in the video description below. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.